Hi, this is Zach from MyCodeTeacher.com. Today we're going to discuss multitasking in iOS 4. We're going to build an application that plays audio, and when you leave the application, the audio will continue to run in the background. Before we do that, I want to discuss a few main points about multitasking. Now, before multitasking was enabled in the iPhone, when the app would start, it would call did finish launching. Now, iOS 4 replaces did finish launching with a method called did finish launching with options. So when the app starts, it goes to this method. We can put in any initializing code and run the app based off of that. If there isn't a URL to open from the application, then it's going to go ahead and continue on to the method application did become active. From that point, the app begins running as we program it to run. And it won't have any interruptions unless there's a phone call or if you hit the home button. Now, if the user hits the home button or there's a task switcher, such as you program a button to go to Safari, for example, on the iPhone, then it's going to close out of the application and it's going to call, before it closes out, application will terminate. Now, after we execute the method application will terminate, it's going to close and leave RAM completely. So that's where the iPhone stood before it enabled multitasking. If there was a phone call, it would call the method application will resign active. So basically you could save data or do anything before a phone call comes up, and then if the user ignores the phone call, then it will actually come back to application to become active, and if they accepted the phone call, then it go ahead and closes the application. So Apple really left us with few options on how to handle things without multitasking capabilities. Now in iOS 4, there's a much more complicated process. It becomes probably about twice as complicated as all the stuff I was mentioning before. So I'm going to go ahead and try and explain this to you. Now, with multitasking, when the app starts, just like how it was when there wasn't multitasking, it's going to go ahead and call the method did finish launching with options. Now, if there isn't a URL to open again, then it's going to go ahead and go to application did become active, just like when there is no multitasking. So again, from that point, the application begins running as programmed. Now, there's a few options that happens at this point. Before, when there's no multitasking, if you hit the home button, the application would call a method and close out. Now, in this case, if the user is running the iPhone OS 4 or greater, basically instead of calling application will terminate, it's going to call application will resign active. Now, immediately after calling application will resign active, it's going to call application did enter background. Now, this is where you can put a whole bunch of code in on certain tasks for the iPhone to handle while it's in the background. There's generally two ways that the documentation says is the best way to go about handling multitasking. There's info.plist, which is standard in every application, and with info.plist we can actually insert settings such as required background modes. Now there's three different options you can include for required background modes in the info.plist, and the first one is audio, which is what we're going to be using today. So Apple makes this very simple for us as far as audio goes. The location and a few other background modes get a little bit more complicated, but we're going to start with the most basic multitasking concept today, and that's audio. Now, if there isn't an included background task in the iPhone, you can actually call a method to finish executing code for X amount of seconds. You would just have to specify the amount of seconds, and the process will continue running in the background for that many seconds. Now, you have to understand, if your application is taking up too much RAM, it's going to go ahead and just close it. This is why Apple has programmed multitasking this way, so it doesn't take up the resources on your iPhone and drain your battery. So we have to be as efficient as possible. Now, like I said, we're going to go ahead and work with audio today. So let's go ahead and create a project. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File, New Project, and we're going to make it a view-based application, and make sure your product is for the iPhone and not the iPad. So we're going to go ahead and call this background audio. And now, like I said, the first thing we need to do is we're going to go to our info.plist. So I'm going to go hit our resources, and we see background audio -info.plist. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, And we're going to click on the last row here and hit the plus sign so we can add a new key in here. And we're going to make the key called required background modes. Now it should be in there. So here you see it has one item in there. It is an array by default, so we're going to go ahead and click this arrow, and you see item 1 has nothing in there, and we're going to go ahead and say audio. So now the app knows when it goes into the background, it's going to play audio. Okay? So one thing we need to do is we're going to go to our app delegate file, and you'll see all of the methods that I was talking about in here on what's going to execute under different circumstances. So we see application will resign active, application did enter background, application will enter foreground, application did become active, and application will terminate. So these are all going to be our methods that we're going to use for multitasking. In this tutorial, we're really just going to be using application did enter background, and that's really all we need for audio because, like I said before, the iPhone SDK makes it extremely easy to handle any audio for the background. So let's go ahead and implement our audio. Now, we're going to have to add a framework, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to Add, Existing Frameworks, and we're going to select AV Foundation right here. So AV Foundation is Apple's audio framework. It can also be used for video and a bunch of other things like recording. We're going to use this again just for the audio, and because it's made by Apple, it's automatically going to work with the multitasking. So let's go ahead and open up our interface builder file here, and we're going to go ahead and put a button in here to play the audio. You see it loads up right here. So I'm going to go to Tools, Library, and I'm going to put a nice button in here. We'll just call it Play Audio. Alright, now let's go back into the code and we'll connect the outlets. So we're going to go in here to the View Controller. We need to put a method in here, IB action, play audio. Go ahead and save that here, and in the .m we're going to actually put the method in here, IB action, play audio. Okay, so we've got the method here. Now we need to, in the .h, we need to import the AV audio header file. So put a left caret AV foundation / AV audio player .h. So this is now included. Now we can go back to the .m and set methods. So when the button is clicked, we need to make a URL to the file, and after the URL we need to allocate an instance of AV audio player and initialize it with the contents of a URL, which has to be an NS URL, and we'll have to set the number of loops. We'll probably only make it 1 loop or 0 loops, whatever you choose, and we're going to go ahead and play the audio. So let's go ahead and make a string here, NS string, and we'll call this sound URL, and we're going to make this connected to the bundle of our files in the application. So NS bundle, main bundle, path for resource, and we'll say the path for the resource is, I have it on my desktop, song, and it's going to be of type MP3. So of type MP3, and we'll end that URL. Okay, so now we need to make an NS URL with this string that we just made. So I'm going to call this player URL, and I'm going to set that equal to an allocated instance of NS URL. So NS URL, we're going to allocate that. So we're going to initialize the file. So initialize the file URL with a path, and we just created the path above, which is a path for the resource from the NS bundle, and that is set to sound URL. So we've got our path and our NSURL, and now we need to actually allocate the instance of the player. So this is AV audio player, and we're going to call this song equals AV audio player allocate initialize with contents of URL, which is going to be player URL with error set to nil. And now we're going to take song and we're going to set the number of loops, and we'll say I'll just do 5 loops, it doesn't really matter. And that's not required to actually play it. If you don't set it, it's going to be by default 0. And we're going to say song play. Okay, so now that we've got the method done, we need to actually connect the IB action. So that's going to be in Files Owner here, Tools Inspector, wrong file here. This has to be in background audio view controller.nib. Go to Files Owner, and you see the play audio is under received actions, so we'll drag this and connect it, touch up inside. And so before we build, make sure you drag in song.mp3, copy items in the destination group folder, have that checked. So song.mp3 is included. Now I'm telling you before the application launches that it's not going to multitask, and I'm going to show you why. We've done everything the documentation says, but one thing the documentation didn't make very clear to me when I was researching this is that we need to actually include another method inside of, I believe it's application did enter background, and we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to show you kind of a before and after. So we're going to go ahead and build and run. So we're going to go ahead and hit play audio. Now I'm going to go ahead and X out of the app by hitting the home button here, and you'll see that the audio cuts out. So I'm going to turn this up so you can hear. And see it cuts out. So let's go ahead and close the simulator. And now right here in application did enter background, let's put this method in here, and the method is called, it basically accesses the application instance, and it's going to be called begin background task with expiration handler. Now remember I was mentioning before that we can actually set an expiration time limit of how long the application is going to last before it stops running. But in this case, since it's audio, we can just not put a parameter in there. We'll just set nil to that value, and it will tell the application that it needs to run its proper background tasks. So I'm going to say UI application shared application begin background task with expiration handler nil. Now we'll rebuild the application. We'll play the audio. And there you go. The audio continues to play. So if you double click the home, come over here, you'll notice that it's actually not connected to the controller. That's going to be for another tutorial. But you do see that the audio does continue to play in the background. And if we were to have multiple audio sounds, for example, a lot of people like to make sound mixers or whatnot that play a lot of audio files at once, all of them would continue to run in the background. It's not just for one file. So that's going to go ahead and conclude this introduction to multitasking. Much more on multitasking to come in the near future. My name is Zach from MyCodeTeacher.com. Thanks for watching.